Welcome to Mom and Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. The Mom and Mind podcast has been a passion project for me, absolutely, for the past 3 years. It's been an honor to go on this journey with you and have you be a part of the Mom and Mind community. In an effort to keep our podcast strong and growing, I've now set up a Patreon page for the Mom and Mind podcast. What's a Patreon? It's basically crowdfunding, a donation platform where you can help move this podcast forward so we can continue to get these awesome episodes out to you and all of the other moms and families who deserve to know that they are not alone. Contributions can range anywhere from $2 a month up to $25 a month, where you can become part of the Mom and Mind Collaborative, where as a professional, we can brainstorm together on how to get all of our voices for perinatal mental health out into the world. Come check it out at patreon.com/momandmind. We would love to have your support to keep this mission going strong. Welcome to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. I had this really interesting realization a couple of days ago. I was in a room of people and introduced myself, and I often introduce myself as Katiyun Kayeni, which is my full name. And a while later, someone came up to me and had put two and two together and said, "Oh, you're Dr. Kat." And then I had that realization that this happens quite often because I go by Dr. Kat so frequently. People don't associate my full name with me. But my full name, Katiyun Kayeni, is something I'm actually really proud of. And, I have mixed reactions from some people really want me to go by my full name only and really just make sure that other people pronounce it correctly and honor my full name and all of that, which I love. And I really appreciate the sentiment. And also going by Kat is really a lot easier. So anyhow, just wanted to put that out there, and maybe I'll be sprinkling in my full name to these episodes here and there, just to make sure people aren't confused. When you see my name, it's always spelled out as Katiyun Kayeni, and something I'm really proud of, but Dr. Kat is catchy and a lot easier. So moving right along, our guest today, Jen Gaskell, is coming on to talk about her story and how she got through postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. I'm really glad that she wants to bring these topics to the Mom and Mind podcast, and very specifically to talk about rage, because it's one of those symptoms, one of those things that we don't hear about a lot. And a lot of people who experience this rage feel overwhelmed by it and confused by it, but it does come along with anxiety and depression. Not for everybody, but certainly it can be scary when these really intense feelings come up. So she's going to share her story, how she noticed what was going on for her, how she got help in healing, and now how she has made it through her experience to support other moms. Jen is a quality professional that works full-time outside of the home. She and her husband live outside of the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin with their two daughters, ages 8 and 11. Jen used writing and her blog to help her navigate her journey through postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. She was a former co-producer of Listen to Your Mother Milwaukee, where she was part of the inaugural Milwaukee cast telling her story of PPD. She's written for Postpartum Progress and was a member of their editorial team for 3 years. Jen was a Climb Out of the Darkness team leader for Milwaukee, Wisconsin for 4 years. She helps lead a Facebook group of local moms who've been through postpartum mood disorders. And she recently became a PSI helpline volunteer. So let's meet Jen. Welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Kat, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're here too. We've kind of touched base on the internet and social media, and I know you've been really active in the perinatal mental health community, and I'm really honored that you'd like to share your story with us.
Oh my goodness.
Very
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So, I'll let you start wherever you'd like to start about your story.
Sure. So I experienced postpartum depression and anxiety with the birth of my youngest, who's now 8 years old. At the time, I didn't realize it, but I struggled with anxiety throughout the pregnancy. And it really kind of culminated, was around Mother's Day. So she was born on October, so she would have been about 7 months, was when I realized that I had been basically anxious for almost a year and a half.
Oh.
I wasn't feeling like myself. I just felt like I was going through the motions and I'm like, I need to do something. I need help, right? Like, where do I go? Who do I talk to? So I went online, right? I Googled postpartum depression and, like, what are the symptoms? And at that postpartum progress had the, what are the symptoms of postpartum anxiety? So I like basically printed everything off and put a check mark, right? Mm-hmm. What are all the symptoms I'm having? Okay. Pretty sure it's anxiety. So the hospital I delivered at actually gave us a pamphlet and they had a parents group that was like, they called it Beyond the Blues, like a postpartum support group. So you could go there and there was a lactation consultant who was also a doula. And she'd also been certified through PSI that kind of led that group. And there was also a social worker, an LCSW, who was affiliated with that. So I was like, oh, where is this person? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, they're 15 minutes from my house.
Wow.
I can. Okay. So then the next call that I made was to my cousin, who's actually a social worker herself in a different capacity. But I said, I'm not okay, right? And I started crying. I'm not okay. I think I have postpartum anxiety. What do I need to say to be seen as quickly as possible, but so that they won't take my kids away? Because she's a child forensic social worker, right? So she talks to children all day, right? So she sees the bad side, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do I get in? Well, are you thinking of it? So she went through the list with me. Don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt the kids. I just want to stop feeling like this, right? Like feeling just miserable and anxious. And just like I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed. So I was able to make a call, and I think my therapist called me back the following day, and she'd had a cancellation that week. And I want to say, I think I took a day off of work to go, or I'd already had a planned vacation day. And so I went and took the baby with me and saw her, and had went to the group at the hospital first because it was more for like stay at home. And I just kind of sat there and didn't really say a whole lot. And then that kind of gave me the courage to, like, since I was there and it was only about 5 minutes from the therapist's office, and then I went there and started to get treatment. And I think that was the biggest step, was just making those first 2 phone calls, right? You don't realize how badly you're struggling. And when I talked to my husband, he was like, whatever you need to do, but you haven't been yourself for such a long time. And to hear someone say that to you, it's just, when kids are little, my oldest was 3, you just feel like you're in survival mode and you're like, well, this is normal. Everybody's stressed out. I'm a bad mom. Aww. I should be able to handle 2 kids, right? That was the thing that I'm
all the time.
Right? I'm just beating myself up. Like, come on. Your sister-in-law has twins. She has twins and she has 2 other kids. She's handling it fine. What is your problem? Like, what's my excuse? I can't ask for help from her or from, all of our parents at that time were working. No one was retired. And so, we didn't want to be a burden there either. And you're like, well, we'll just do it. We can take care of it. We don't need a village. We'll just keep settling along, right. You think about that. I think about that now. And I was like, you just feel like you don't want to be a burden to people.
Right. That's part of it, right? The anxiety, all of that stuff. Oh, so how did you know finally, I guess, after 7 months, what were the things that tipped you off?
So it was a friend of mine was getting her yoga teacher certification. So I went to class. What do you want to do on Mother's Day? I just want to go to this yoga class. And it was there when I sat in relaxation pose that I was like, and I actually felt probably still that buzz of anxiety, but more relaxed than I'd felt in a really long time. And then just talking to her, and I kind of remembered in the back of my mind, her talking about her own experience with postpartum depression with her oldest. And she was just really, 2 kids, she was just very empathetic and reassuring, like, the transition is tough. You are doing a wonderful job. And just, I think being with someone who I knew very well, who cared about me, I could say some of the things like, this is really hard. And I just feel like I'm not doing a good job.
Right.
And to get that validation back, like, you're doing a wonderful job and, please take care of yourself. And, that I think that really also was the key that like, okay, it is hard, but how hard is it supposed to be? And what am I doing to take care of myself? Right. That was
important. I mean,
yeah.
All of that, having somebody else who kind of sees you and can validate you and understand where you're at is just so important.
Yeah. And I know that both my mom and my sister had, kind of said, well, if you're struggling, make sure you reach out to your OB. And I was just like, I really like her, but I just was like, I wasn't sure that, I don't know. I don't know what I thought she would say if, like, to that point, nobody had asked me with either of my pregnancies if I'd had any mental health issues in my past, because I had. So that was never in my record because I saw counselors outside of that hospital system. So I was like, she's just, she's nice, but she's like super, I guess I would call her very business and very matter of fact. And I was like, she doesn't have kids. I don't know that, I don't know how she can relate, So yeah, I don't know why I was reluctant to reach out to her. I don't know if I just didn't think she'd be able to provide me with information or if I just thought I would. Right.
Sometimes you just get a feeling, or sometimes the anxiety or depression makes you think certain like ways about asking for help.
I don't know. And I think maybe too, it was because I had gestational diabetes during my pregnancy and with both pregnancies actually, but with this one, because I'd had it with my oldest, I basically started tracking my food right away. I was, pricking my finger and, basically making sure I was exercising the whole time. And I submitted a food journal. And so I really got wrapped up in having a healthy baby and having a healthy pregnancy. And I think that triggered a lot of my anxiety because, you're really focused on what are your numbers, right? Because I didn't want to have to take medication. I didn't want to have to inject myself with insulin. I was terrified of that because we have a long family history of type 2 diabetes. So I'm kind of well aware of what that all entails. And I just, if my numbers were bad, I was having a bad day, even though now the more that I've researched and found the diabetes online community, I was like, oh, just some women just develop that just because of the changes that your bodies go through. And some of us just metabolize insulin differently than others. And it's because you're pregnant and you can be doing everything right. And sometimes stress jumps those numbers up. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong, but I felt like I have to be perfect. You have to have a good pregnancy.
Oh boy. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So the numbers is some kind of like indicator. If then your numbers are bad, then you're bad kind of a thing.
Yes. Yes. That I put a lot of focus on what your blood glucose numbers are. Because you're checking it, I had to check it once in the morning after each of my meals. So after breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think it was just 4 times a day. But I mean, it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot.
You're constantly thinking about it or having to manage something.
Right. And, well, you're pregnant. You should be able to eat for 2. And I wanted to rip out chips from people's hands. Right.
Right.
I was like, I just want chips and I can't really have chips. And
yeah, that's really hard. All right. So this started in pregnancy, the symptoms of anxiety. That's where
Yeah. Basically, as soon as I found out I had the positive pregnancy test, I went to see my OB right away. And then I want to say 2 days later, I was in the office with the diabetes educator, getting a new monitor and getting a new test strips. And because they basically considered it then a high risk pregnancy.
Right. So lots of stuff shifts after that.
Yes.
Okay. Right. And even the kind of term high risk, I mean, that's used across the board for anything that's high risk,
Yes.
even if it's not the highest risk, but high risk
Correct.
sounds really bad.
Yeah. And, if you don't manage it, the baby could be like too big and, they could have low blood sugar and, all these risks. And it's like, I get it that they want you to be compliant, but I think they underestimate how naturally anxious some moms are. And if you're
Sure.
on the higher end, that makes you like just terrified.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is real. Okay, so this is already in pregnancy. You can feel this kind of going. The
Yes.
anxiety is there. And then how did that proceed? What other things did you notice during pregnancy or postpartum?
The anxiety turning a lot into irritability, which then I think once I was postpartum, it then spiraled into the rage. Like I just felt like I was a failure. Everything set me off. We could never get out the door on time. I always felt like I was running late to work and just running all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just, yeah, I just hated pregnancy. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I knew, like, I want this baby. This is a planned baby, but this is my last pregnancy. I had sciatica too, and I'd gotten the diastasis, the umbilical hernia. So my muscles were moving apart so much that I ended up with one of those. It almost looked to me like a girdle type thing, except that I couldn't really wear it to drive because it pressed right against my bladder.
Oh,
so, right. So it was like, okay.
Yeah, you're in physical pain. You're in emotional pain.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And I think I didn't really enjoy that pregnancy as much, I think, because I was really worried about what it was going to be like to bring the second one into the family. And then I was stressed out because we were trying to get my oldest potty trained before her sister came. And because, I'd heard all these stories about kids like completely regressing. And I'm like, I can't have two in diapers. I can't have two in diapers. So,
right. There's a lot of pressure building.
Yes.
Throughout.
Yeah.
So the anxiety you experienced also is this irritability and rage.
Yeah.
Can you, I don't know if it's possible, but I'm thinking for like both people who are out there who are like, I don't know, maybe I have irritability and rage, or who don't know what it's like. Can you at all describe what the feeling is like?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So for the irritability, it would be like the littlest things would irritate me. Like, and I would get irrationally angry. So I could be from like 0 to 60 and I could feel it usually in my face, right? That my face would get hot, my ears would get hot. I would just yell or I would throw things. I'm pretty sure I broke several remotes. It'd be something like my husband forgot to wash the bottles or something, or he didn't, put the bottle accessories back together. And that would just set me off. Like, I can't believe it did that. And I would just, just yelling. And I think one of the indicators too was I got so mad at him one time over something really silly and I pushed him. Something that I've never done in my life before and in front of the 3-year-old, which I think at that point, that was probably another key indicator that like something is really wrong. Because you tell your little one, no pushing, gentle touches, nice touches, right? And you hear your parent basically throwing a temper tantrum. I mean, that's what it felt like, that I couldn't control it, that it just consumed me. But I couldn't tell you where it would come from or what would set me off. And so I think that that's the scary part, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. I'm awful because I'm angry all the time. Why am I angry all the time? Just like, I really felt like nothing could bring me joy. And that was really when I got diagnosed, that it was, was the anxiety. And then that anxiety and that rage, kind of led to that depression, because then you start feeling guilty and shame and you just keep perpetuate that cycle of just beating yourself up over and over again.
Right. That is a really hard place to be mentally, emotionally, because it's hard to know how to get out of it. I mean,
Yes.
it's not like you would have been out of it if you already knew how.
Right. Right. And I think that was really, once I could recognize some of those signs and like know when you have to take a break or what are things that would trigger me, like through recovery, that it was like, oh, okay, I'm overstimulated, or, this is really affecting me. I need to take a break, right? I felt like because I worked full time outside of the home, I felt like I shouldn't be taking a break from my family, that I should be with them 24/7 all the time. And that I should, cherish and love every moment of it when I wasn't there, again,
right.
it's
The
just
guilt.
the guilt. And I think it was like realizing that no, therapy, spending time in, that hour. And she would have me do like mindfulness breaks where you're just like laying down, doing yoga again, just, okay, you can take a pause, you don't have to react to everything. I think that really helped me learning a lot of the different mindfulness tools. And then once I got diagnosed too, I'm kind of a research junkie. So I was like, they're flagging me because I read like literally every book I could find, postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety.
Yeah.
Anything that was out there, I read. Because it was like, I want to understand and I want to find stories. And I was online looking at blogs, and that really helped me like, oh my gosh, this is normal. And people get better. And here are some of the things they've tried. Here are things people have done. And that was really kind of the catalyst for me saying like, okay, I know what it is. I know what some of the causes are. I'm, in therapy, taking medication. And then here are some of these examples of things I can do to like, what do I like to do when I'm not with my kids, right? Like I'm not just a mom,
So that part really sounds like it fed into that irritability, that what you were describing before, that you're supposed to be on all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it was because, I'm very extroverted. So it never occurred to me, I guess, even with the first one, it never occurred to me that even though I'm an extrovert and I love being around people, sometimes I need alone time for my family. And it just, because I was always with my parents and my sister when I was little, and I loved being around all my cousins, that just, for some reason, I didn't make that connection that, parenting and being a wife, that's, full time. It's a lot of responsibility, and that
sure is.
You need to take some time for yourself. But I just, it was really, now that I do that and I'm more intentional about it, it's amazing the difference, right? And I wish I could go back to that younger version of myself and say, you know what? You don't even have to go anywhere. Maybe you just want to sit in your car for like 10 minutes and just sit in your car and just sit. And that's totally fine.
All that like internal pressure to do and be your best all the time is exhausting and impossible.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Yep. Yep.
It's very much the case. That
it's hard to let go of all that stuff.
It is.
Or find some other way to move through life.
Yeah. Because I think when your patterns or, how you've defined yourself gets so established that you're like, no, this is just how I do things. And like, well, no, it's not sustainable anymore. And I think that was one of the key takeaways I had from therapy was that, what am I, exhausting myself for,
Right. So in terms of your kind of healing through this, I mean, there was a lot of self-exploration and discovery of ways that you were coping, it sounds like, that you didn't really need anymore.
Yeah. And I would say blogging really helped a lot just to get it out there, out of my head.
Oh, nice.
And journaling, because I think, when it was the write down, your internal monologue, it was like, well, I would never say this to my friends, right? Like I'm really beating up on myself, and why, give myself some grace. I think that really helped me, because the more I was writing and to have someone come back and say, oh my gosh, I felt the same way. And when I reached out to a woman online in particular, was a fellow mom blogger, was from Canada, who had written about rage. And when I was like, my gosh, I feel like a failure. I don't know what's going on. And the fact that she took time and like wrote me this really beautiful email that I believe I have still saved it all these years later, because it was something that was such a touchstone to, virtually meet other people that might not have been local to me, but were going through the same thing at around the same time. And so then you're not alone, and you're like, okay, I have a community, even if I don't have a local community, because I think it took me a while to feel comfortable talking about what I've been through.
Oh, yeah.
I think it just, when you're in it, I just wasn't really able to express what I was going through until I'd really been in therapy for probably several months and felt comfortable enough. I kind of like outed myself to my parents, and then my in-laws, and, my sister-in-law and my sister. It's kind of a gradual coming out process to, tell people what was going on. And no one knew. A lot of them did not. They said, other than maybe my mom and my sister, who sensed that something they couldn't really know, but they knew just I wasn't doing well, but they couldn't really put their finger on it. But a lot of people were like, oh, I would have never known you were struggling at all. Seemed like you had it all together.
Wow. Yeah, that says a lot to me about how hard moms who are struggling are actually working.
Right.
It takes so much effort for people to not know what's going on outside of you,
Yes.
And it's exhausting. It just kind of feeds the beast also.
Yes.
Because you're just more and more exhausted.
Right.
Yeah, that is really, really speaks a lot to that. So you got to a point where you were comfortable sharing and you were comfortable talking, and that took you on its own journey. Tell us.
Yes, it did. Yeah. So
tell us about that.
So I happened to meet Alexandra Rosas. She was actually a PPD mom. She was, like 16 or 17 years out from her experience. But I realized I was following this woman. She's hilarious. And I'm like, she must live near me. And then my sister-in-law told me about a mom's group where she was talking about new motherhood. And I said, oh my gosh, you met her? Yeah, she lives in Cedarburg. So I emailed her and said, I hope you don't think I'm a stalker, but I would really like to meet you in person. So we met at like a local Starbucks, and it was just this great conversation. And then she followed my blog, I was following hers, and Listen to Your Mother, it's actually still going on, but kind of in a different capacity now. But it was this storytelling show that moms tell, the good, the bad, the ugly of motherhood. And I had a theater background. That's how I met my husband, was doing community theater. And I'd been looking at auditioning for Madison when Alexandra sent me a private message on Twitter and said, I want to bring Listen to Your Mother to Milwaukee. Are you in? And I said, yes. Just, like all caps, yes, because it's something that was creative, brought me back into the theater world.
Yeah.
And then she said, you've got to tell your postpartum story. And I was like, okay, I think I can do it. And she's like, you can do it. You can do it. So she worked with me to kind of edit it down. And I remember like freaking out the day of the show because, before in theater, that's you acting, you're a character. This was like the first time I was telling my story live on stage. Yeah. And then it was going to be recorded and go live on YouTube. So it was kind of like that vulnerability hangover. So I got up there, I told my story, and it was just amazing and freeing. And what ended up happening was that, so we did in Milwaukee for 5 years, and each year we had a postpartum depression story in it. And every person that was a part of the show after me, it was, the one woman had seen me in it, and then she got up the following year to tell her story. It was like set off this great chain reaction, like, well, if she said it. And then I realized that there was a local group of moms. Like the more I told my story, it was like, oh yeah, a bunch of, friends I knew had struggled with it. And it was just, It was amazing. The more vocal I got about it, the more I found people who would, message me and say, me too, me too. And I think that really led me to like, you have to normalize this, right? Because, I don't, for my, especially I have girls, and knowing that well, maybe you could also be susceptible to hormonal changes during puberty and pregnancy and menopause. So it's really, that I just start, that we talk about that and just, well, I said, Mommy took patience pills because I wasn't feeling well. So I went to a talking doctor and we talked about feelings and just, I think really normalizing it for them so that you can be super mom and you can make mistakes and you can apologize. I mean, kids are so loving and forgiving and, you lose your cool and you're like, I'm sorry. All the thoughts that I had that, I was screwing them up forever. And
oh gosh,
it's,
yeah.
I look back on that now and I'm like, I have great relationships. I mean, sometimes they drive me to the moon and I would,
kids
say, right. Go next door, go play. But yeah, I think it's really being able to explain feelings and talk about anxiety. And, now even some of their TV shows that they watch are talking about it. And so, yeah, we actually talked about what panic attacks look like because of an Andy Mack episode. And they're like, do you know what that's like? I said, yeah, Mommy had one. Mommy used to get them. They're like, really? And so it was another way to just use an example to go, well, this is what it's like. And this is what it feels like. And here's what you can do if you ever have one, or here's what you can do to help a friend if they have one. Right?
Wow.
Just, just the empathy. I think just realizing that everybody's just doing the best they can.
Right.
Parenting, and we are all winging it.
Right. Yeah. Yes, we absolutely are.
There's always going to be something where you're like, where you text a friend or you text your sister and you go, has this ever happened to you? And what do you do? And sometimes you just shrug and you go,
yeah,
I haven't seen that, but.
Right. Or you text someone and say, please come get this kid.
Right. Yes.
That's all normal.
Yes.
Normal stuff. For
Really
sure.
normal.
Yeah. But I mean, that is such an amazing healing journey. Obviously I'm so sad and sorry for moms who go through this and for your experience too. And also sometimes this really beautiful stuff happens as a result.
Yeah. It really just, being able to listen to your mother for as long as you did and the power of storytelling, even the stories that didn't make it to the stage were still like just as powerful. I mean,
there's so many of them. There's so many stories.
So many. I mean, I just remember we'd have to bring Kleenex because there were just so many touching and moving stories. And just to hear, someone say me too, or somebody, just thank you for your story. And it just, that there are pieces of everyone's story that everybody has a story to tell and share, and that you're not as different as you think you are from someone else. You can find a common thread or a commonality in everybody's story.
Totally. Right.
I'm a much better listener now from that project, I can tell you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So with all that you've been through, I mean, I heard throughout you talking about this, some really hopeful messages for moms. And I'm specifically thinking about a mom who's like maybe first identifying or hearing that, or at least relating to this idea of rage and irritability and anxiety and depression. What do you say to those moms?
What I would say is that, it's not you, right? The voices inside your head that tell you that you're a bad mom, that it's the depression talking, right? Like a lot of us that were on the PPD chat on Twitter back in the early 2000s, we gave that persona in your head a name. We called her Velma, right? Like Velma's being a jerk today, because it's a way to visualize what is happening in your brain and how, those negative thoughts, and that you can usually tell, like, I just don't feel like myself. Like, trust that instinct and, go to Postpartum Support International. There's the warm line. There are coordinators who can find you resources. There's support groups. There's so many women out there who've been through it and who, once you get through an experience like that, I think I always felt like it's like the Marines. We don't want to leave another mom behind. We know somebody's out there and they reach out. I want to grab that hand and say,
Totally.
I can help you. What do you need? What are you looking for? Do you just need somebody to text you? You just need someone to talk to, right?
Right.
What can we help you with? Because I think it can be so isolating, but then once you realize that there are more people out there and how common it is, then you feel less alone. And I think that the power of that community, either online or in person, it's huge.
Yeah,
because
it really is.
It just gives you that sense of it's not just me and I'm not a bad person and this is normal, it's common, it's treatable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be like this forever. You will get better. Recovery it's not always, straight, steady up a hill. There's lots of, it's a journey. It's there's valleys, peaks and valleys, but that you do come through the other side and that you find healing and hope, and you can really take that experience and, let it kind of transform you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your healing journey too. And it's so important for all of us to know that, things can be really hard, and that you can get better, especially from all of this. And just like you were saying, sharing your story is so powerful. And for someone out there right now who's listening is hearing your story and having hope. And that's what this is about. That's why we need your story. And I'm so grateful that you came on to share.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I just love the work and all the different things that I'm learning on the podcast, because it helps me in my work, as just a maternal mental health advocate and helping other moms, just so that that there's hope. There's always hope, and, not to give up that hope, because you will get better.
You will get better. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Jen, so much for coming on and sharing your story. I just know that so many people are going to be able to relate to this. And again, it's so important for us to hear other people's stories, because really it can be hard. It can be hard to listen, but it also gives so much hope. You can go read Jen's blog at tranquilamama.wordpress.com. Find her on Twitter and Instagram at JenRunPody, or Facebook at Tranquila Mama Blog. And you can see Jen talk about her story on the YouTube clip from Listen to Your Mother. We'll have that in the show notes as well. And thank you all again so much for being with us and listening to the Mom and Mind podcast. I invite you to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't yet. That way you can get all of these episodes downloaded directly to you. Wherever you listen to this podcast from, you can just find their subscribe button, and it's as easy as that. Thanks so much for being with us. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.